Well, it has been a busy week here in the state of Tennessee. The NCAA has launched an investigation into the University of Tennessee, alleging they broke rules involving name, image, and likeness. Now, this is entirely separate from the case that concluded last summer for violations that occurred under former head football coach Jeremy Pruitt. This latest investigation involves five-star quarterback Nico Iamaleava and potentially more athletes among other sports. And that is just the beginning of the drama, but that is where we will start and bring in our friend Patrick Brown from GoVols247. First, Patrick, from what I gather, it sounds like Tennessee has been given a draft but not a formal notice of allegations from the NCAA. Overall, though, what is the latest out of Knoxville?
Well, Emily, it's been a busy week here in Knoxville, and it's kind of been one thing after the other since news first broke on, I believe it was Tuesday afternoon, sort of the latest salvo in this sort of back and forth public PR back and forth between Tennessee and the NCAA is a statement this afternoon from Tennessee Athletic Director Danny White, who has kind of been a little bit quiet. Obviously, Chancellor Dondi Plowman had a letter that got out that she sent to NCAA President Charlie Baker on Monday. And then there was the lawsuit filed by the attorneys general of Tennessee and Virginia on Wednesday. And Danny White's statement, again, took aim at what the NCAA is doing in investigating Tennessee. I think the three main points are he comes out and sort of accuses the NCAA of leaking information to the media, despite saying in a statement that the NCAA put out on Wednesday night that they don't comment on specific cases. And then he accused the NCAA of trying to move the goalposts. And I think probably the biggest thing in the statement is that he and I guess Tennessee had reviewed thousands or hundreds of records of coaches and personnel, phone records, and had not found a single NIL violation. And he accused the NCAA of moving the goalposts to try to find something and reach a quote predetermined outcome, which is a pretty substantial accusation to levy at a governing body like the NCAA. And then at the end of it, he said, "I refuse to allow the NCAA to irrationally make an example of Tennessee for its own agenda," which again I think it sort of is the latest and kind of shows what Tennessee's stance is in this, and they're going to fight it, and they don't believe they've done anything wrong. We've heard that publicly now from some of Tennessee's leadership, and that's been sort of the same thing that's been echoed privately as well, is that Tennessee doesn't think it stepped out of bounds on any NIL things that it's done over the past 2.5 years since NIL entered college sports. And certainly, again, Tennessee, I think, plans to defend itself, and we saw it again this afternoon with Danny White's statement taking aim at the NCAA.
Yeah, those statements coming out of Knoxville have been spicy, and they have been coming out fast and furious. Another one that we saw was actually from Tennessee's Collective, the volunteer club, which is run by Spire Sports Group. They've come under fire here. So what is their involvement in all of this with the NCAA investigation?
Well, I think that's at the crux of this battle between Tennessee and the NCAA is the recruiting side of NIL. I don't think the NCAA has really, since NIL came into existence, really said anything and tried to slow down anything about current players necessarily earning compensation for their name, image, and likeness. It's been sort of more about recruiting that they've tried to put parameters in place, I should say, and that's one of the main ones that they've tried to get schools to adhere to. But the guidelines have been murky about is a collective a booster. I think that's something that Danny White took offense with or mentioned in his statement today, is that the NCAA has tried to take the old booster bylaws and apply them to collectives. And so, as you mentioned, Emily, Tennessee's got the volunteer club, which is run by Spire Sports, which that was founded, I believe, in 2020 before NIL was even created. Certainly, as you guys mentioned off the top of the show, the recruitment of Nico Iamaleava is sort of one of the focuses of this investigation. And their Aspire's attorney Tom Mars the other night came out and tried to shed some light on that situation by saying that Nico signed a deal with Spire to more or less handle his NIL rights, and it was not bound to his school. He was not that Tennessee had nothing to do with it, and that contract, that agreement that he agreed with, did not count as an inducement. And that's what the NCAA has tried to I guess retroactively go back and find out where instances where maybe NIL was used as an inducement. But I think Tennessee's argument, both at the university level and even at the legal level, is that those inducements are they're trying to limit recruiting, and NIL's impact on it is sort of dishonest and is not genuine, because in this day and age, with NIL being such a part of college sports, recruits are naturally going to consider that as a factor in where they're going to choose a school, along with the other factors. And that's certainly, I think, an area that Tennessee, both in some of the things that we've seen from their leadership, has tried to say, and also that was brought up and pushed pretty hard in the lawsuit that was filed the other morning.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that lawsuit in just a bit, but I want to get to some more of these statements. I guess not technically a statement, more of a letter that was released by Dondi Plowman, and this was to the NCAA. We're going to show it in pieces, but I want to start here with this section. She says, "It's inconceivable that our institution's leadership would be cited as exemplary leadership in July 2023 than as a cautionary example of a lack of institutional control only 6 months later." Now, this is important because Tennessee could be labeled a repeat violator. You also see the terminology of a lack of institutional control. That's a buzz phrase when it comes to NCAA rule violators, and it could come with some enhanced penalties there. But Patrick, why was the NCAA looking at Tennessee again here?
Well, Emily, I think the NCAA is trying to kind of go back and retroactively police the NIL space. It's something that obviously they'd never really had a clear-cut policy on it, and that's been one of the criticisms levied at the NCAA is that a lot of their NIL, I think they called it an interim policy, quote-unquote, was vague, and it kind of left all parties involved kind of unsure of how to go about it. And I think if you kind of follow some of the programs that the NCAA has gone after or has fought, even gotten sanctions with, when you look at Florida State, you look at Miami, I think there's been sanctions there. Some of those programs were, I don't want to say pioneers necessarily, but maybe early adopters. Obviously, we saw the success that Florida State football has had. They put that roster together, using NIL very successfully, and it's led to on-field success. Obviously, when NIL was first out there, Miami was sort of a one-man collective with John Ruiz, and he was not bashful about what he was going to do. Florida's under investigation by the NCAA for NIL stuff and kind of centers on the Jaden Rashada situation that was high profile. And then you look at Tennessee, they obviously, as we touched on, had the Nico Iamaleava recruitment, which it was sort of maybe the first high profile recruitment that NIL was linked to. Obviously, there was details of a deal, of an NIL deal, which he could sign because he was in high school in California, where that was one of the states that said high school athletes could benefit from NIL. And so that was sort of a trendsetter, and it sort of set the market to a point now where if you want a quarterback, a five-star quarterback as a recruit, or a big-time guy in the transfer portal, or if you want to keep somebody, it's going to cost you. I mean, that's just sort of the reality of where this has gotten. So I think if you follow the NCAA's movements and some of the programs that we know they've targeted, I think there's probably a lot more schools that are getting looked at. There's sort of those themes there and things that you could connect as. And if you're the NCAA, you saw Tennessee. They were, again, I think they were sort of an early adopter of NIL. They've had a strong NIL presence really since NIL came into the space. That would be a place with that, and you throw Nico in there. That would be a place if you're the NCAA and you're trying to look to show some power and show that you still have some control. That would be a place to start, and perhaps that's what got them looking at Tennessee. And this investigation didn't just start this week. This has been going on for some time now. So I think that's the NCAA just trying to still show that it has some power and try to put the toothpaste back in the tube with some of the way it's gone about its NIL guidance and its NIL rules and trying to enforce those now.
Yeah, if this all sounds very confusing to you, it's because it is. And that's something that Tennessee is arguing, and of course the lawsuit that we'll get to in just a bit. But before I let you go, I mean, the NIL space in general is still so new, and the NCAA investigations concerning it, as you said, have just been popping up recently. You mentioned Florida State, another one. Now Tennessee, you anticipate that there's probably more down the road depending on what happens with the reaction here. But all of that makes it hard to predict how this one ends up. In your eyes, though, what could this latest investigation mean for Tennessee going forward?
Well, Emily, I'm not sure that we're going to get any sort of resolution on this for a while. These things tend to not have, easy endings. They're typically messy, and they typically are drawn out over a long period of time. So as much as back and forth and as much as there's been something almost every few hours over the past couple days, I don't know how long that'll continue. I think we're all wondering, as you mentioned, will Tennessee get a notice of allegations, a formal inquiry at that point? That's obviously maybe the next step from the NCAA standpoint. What happens with this lawsuit? That lawsuit has requested that a temporary restraining order is put in place by the courts on the NCAA to keep them from enforcing its own NIL rules in the recruiting space as early as next week. And then I think we're going to see if any other states join in on that lawsuit and if any other schools push their legislatures or their attorneys general to get involved. And I think in the meantime, there's probably going to be some negative recruiting that Josh Heupel and this staff's going to have to deal with. They're hosting a junior day this weekend. Obviously, they've already landed George McIntyre, one of the top quarterbacks in the 2025 class. And as we saw with the Jeremy Pruitt case when that staff first got here, or when Heupel's staff first got here, I should say, they had to deal with a lot of negative recruiting, and Tennessee's going to get hammered and all that stuff. That stuff's going to be out there because of, as you mentioned, the repeat offender stuff. But I think Tennessee's stance is pretty clear. I think publicly now and privately, we've heard the same thing, that they don't think they stepped out of bounds. They don't think they overstepped anything. They don't think they committed any violations. We've seen that both in the letter that Donnie Plowman sent to the NCAA and Danny White's statement today that Tennessee doesn't think it did anything wrong. And so I think if the NCAA tries to levy anything against them or impose any sanctions, I think Tennessee's going to fight tooth and nail for that. We saw them fight tooth and nail to keep the postseason ban off the table with the Jeremy Pruitt stuff. There were a couple of negotiated resolutions in that process that Tennessee tried to not have a postseason ban. The NCAA wouldn't allow it, and so Tennessee went the distance. They went to a committee on infractions hearing to make sure that was not on the table for Heupel and those players that were not involved. So Tennessee, they've come out really defiantly, almost angrily this week with some of the things they've said, and so I think they're kind of digging in and ready to put on a fight, and they're not going to take anything from the NCAA, and they don't think they did anything wrong at this point. We'll have to see if the NCAA has any sort of smoking gun, but at this point, Tennessee feels like it's done everything right, and they're ready to fight to protect themselves.
Yeah, they were lauded for their cooperation with the previous investigation. I don't think so much in this case. I think our colleague Wes Rucker put it perfectly in his article on GoVols247. Tennessee does not seem scared. It seems, as you said, angry. But you will be all over this. Never a dull moment on the Tennessee beat. We appreciate you taking some time to talk to us, Patrick. As I said, they are all over this story at GoVols247. Also, everything surrounding recruiting and all things Tennessee, that is your place. Check it out, GoVols247.com.